Welcome back to our verse-by-verse exploration of Genesis 22:10. In our previous video, we dove deep into the linguistic architecture of this verse. We examined every Hebrew word, every verb form, every grammatical nuance. We listened to the cantillation marks and heard the music of the Torah. We traced the phonetic patterns and the mystical word plays. Now, in this second part, we step into the physical world of Abraham. We are going to examine the knife itself, the maakheleth, with forensic precision. We are going to climb the mountain of Moriah and feel the wind, the heat, the dust. We are going to explore the ancient Near Eastern context, the legal structures, the household dynamics, the cultural realities that shaped this moment. We are going to understand what it meant, in concrete, physical, historical terms, for a father to stretch out his hand and take a knife to slaughter his son. So let us continue. The forensic anatomy of the Bronze Age maakheleth. Now we must pause and examine, with forensic precision, the physical nature of the instrument in Abraham's hand. This is not an abstract theological symbol. This is a real object, made of real materials, held by a real hand, under a real sun, on a real mountain. We must look closer at the tool in Abraham's hand. If the blade was made of flint, it was likely an olaf, knapped from high-quality chert found in the wadis of the Negev. The process of knapping is an ancient and precise art. It involves the deliberate striking of one stone against another to create a conchoidal fracture. This fracture produces an edge that is literally molecularly sharp. A flint blade, when properly knapped, is sharper than a modern steel scalpel. Under a microscope, the edge of a flint knife appears as a series of microserrations, each one capable of slicing through skin, muscle, and tendon with almost no resistance. The process of knapping involves a deliberate striking of the stone to create a conchoidal fracture, resulting in an edge that is literally molecularly sharp. It is sharper than a modern steel scalpel. The flint itself would have been selected for its quality. High-grade chert has a smooth, glassy texture and a uniform color, ranging from honey brown to deep black. The napper would have tested the stone for flaws, for cracks, for impurities, because any weakness in the stone could cause the blade to shatter at the moment of use. Once knapped, the blade would have been hafted, attached to a handle. The handle might have been fashioned from the horn of an ibex, a wild mountain goat that roamed the highlands of Canaan. Ibex horn is dense, smooth, and naturally curved, fitting comfortably in the palm. Alternatively, the handle could have been carved from dense olive wood, a wood known for its strength and its resistance to cracking. The handle would be fashioned from the horn of an ibex or carved from dense olive wood, wrapped in sinew that had dried and tightened over time. This was not a weapon of war but a tool of precision. The blade would have been fixed to the handle with a binding of sinew, the dried tendons of an animal, which would shrink and tighten as it dried, creating a bond stronger than any glue. The entire knife, blade and handle together, would have weighed approximately 300 to 500 grams. This is not heavy, but it is substantial. It has presence. It has weight. When held in the hand, it pulls at the tendons of the wrist. It requires a firm grip to control. If the blade was made of bronze, the process of creation would have been entirely different but equally intricate. If it was early bronze, it would have been cast in a clay mold and then cold hammered to achieve hardness. Bronze is an alloy of copper and tin, typically in a ratio of 9 parts copper to 1 part tin. In the historical and cultural layer, we must examine the specific chemistry of the knife. If it was a bronze blade of the Middle Bronze Age, it was an alloy of copper and arsenic or tin. The process of smelting this metal required a furnace heated to over 1000 degrees Celsius. The metals would have been melted together in a clay crucible over a fire fueled by charcoal, reaching temperatures of over 1000 degrees Celsius. The blade was born in fire, and it was being brought to a mountain of fire. The molten bronze would then have been poured into a clay mold, shaped in the form of a blade. Once cooled and removed from the mold, the blade would have been cold hammered, struck repeatedly with a stone hammer to compress the metal and increase its hardness. This process, known as work-hardening, makes the bronze denser and more durable. Finally, the edge would have been ground and honed on a whetstone until it could slice through papyrus with a single stroke. A bronze blade would have a distinctive appearance. The metal itself is a warm, golden color when freshly polished, but exposure to air and moisture causes oxidation. Over time, a chemical patina forms on the surface, a mixture of copper carbonates and copper oxides. This patina gives the blade a muted, greenish dark hue. The chemical patina on such a blade, a mixture of copper carbonates, would give it a muted, greenish dark hue under the harsh sun of Moriah. Under the harsh sun of Moriah, the blade would have caught the light, flashing green and gold and brown. It would have been both beautiful and terrible, an object of craftsmanship and an instrument of death. The weight of this instrument, whether flint or bronze, approximately 300 to 500 grams, would pull at the tendons of the wrist. The weight of this instrument, approximately 300 to 500 grams, would pull at the tendons of the wrist. Abraham would have felt the weight. He would have felt the balance. He would have felt the cool smoothness of the handle against his palm. The air at this altitude, roughly 700 meters above sea level, is dry and thin. It carries the scent of dust and parched earth, the smell of rock heated by the sun and the faint trace of desert shrubs, thyme and hyssop. This dryness would have caused the moisture on Abraham's palm to evaporate quickly. Sweat would have formed and then dried almost immediately, leaving a fine salt residue on the skin. This would have made his grip on the smooth handle even more precarious and intense. He would have had to consciously tighten his fingers, to focus his entire being on maintaining control of the blade. The air at this specific moment is crucial. The mountain sits at the edge of the rain shadow. To the west is the moisture of the Mediterranean, and to the east is the searing heat of the Judean desert. At the peak, these two air masses meet, creating an invisible turbulence. This orographic lift often causes a sudden cooling. As Abraham reached for the knife, his skin would have been prickled by a sudden, chilling wind. This is the breath of the Spirit. In the context of the Nuzi texts and the legal structures of the second millennium before Christ, the act of lifting this tool over a son was a formal manumission of the child back to the deity. It was a legal dissolution of the father's rights. In the ancient Near East, children were understood to be gifts from the gods, but they were also legal property of the father. The father had absolute authority over the child's life, marriage, occupation, and even survival. To lift a knife over a child in the context of a religious ritual was to formally relinquish that authority. It was to say, "This child is not mine. This child belongs to the God who gave him. And I return him now, body and soul, to his true owner." This was not murder. This was not infanticide. This was a covenant act, a legal transaction conducted in the presence of the divine witness. The household structures described in the Nuzi texts confirmed that the father's blessing was the most valuable commodity in the ancient world. By lifting the knife, Abraham is legally and physically placing the blessing itself on the edge of a blade. The physical nature of the sacrifice involved the specific legal concept of the burnt offering, or olah, which literally means that which goes up. The maakheleth was the necessary key to release the spirit from the flesh so it could ascend. The historical and cultural context. Now let us step back from the knife itself and enter the broader ancient Near Eastern world in which this story was first told. We need to understand the physical, social, legal, and religious realities that shaped this moment. In the ancient Near East, the relationship between fathers and sons was not merely emotional. It was legal, economic, and covenantal. A son was the continuation of the family line. A son was the inheritor of property. A son was the one who would care for the parents in old age and perform the rituals for the dead. The Code of Hammurabi, a Babylonian law code from the 18th century before Christ, contains numerous provisions about inheritance, adoption, and the rights of sons. One law states, if a man has adopted a son and raised him, that son cannot be reclaimed by his birth parents. Another law states, if a son strikes his father, his hand shall be cut off. The Nuzi tablets, legal documents from ancient Mesopotamia, show that childless couples would often adopt a servant or a slave to be their heir. This helps us understand why Abraham, before Isaac was born, considered his servant Eliezer of Damascus to be his heir. In Genesis 15:2, Abraham laments, "O Lord God, what will you give me, since I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" So when Isaac is finally born, he is not just a son. He is the legal heir, the covenantal heir, the one through whom all the promises of God will be fulfilled. To lose Isaac is to lose everything. Historically, the weight of the moment deepens. In the ancient Near East, a son was an extension of the father's legal identity. To kill the son was to annihilate oneself socially, legally, and economically. The Code of Hammurabi and Nuzi texts reveal the radical nature of this command. Abraham is stepping outside every human structure of security. He is dismantling his own future with his own hand. At the same time, the narrative distinguishes Yahweh from surrounding deities who demanded child sacrifice. This story does not end with blood. It ends with interruption. The knife is raised, not lowered. The physical setting of Genesis 22 is the land of Moriah. Verse 2 tells us that God said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." Moriah is traditionally identified with the site of the future temple in Jerusalem. 2 Chronicles 3:1 says, "Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem on Mount Moriah." So the place where Abraham stretched out his hand is the same place where, centuries later, the priests would stretch out their hands to offer sacrifices in the temple. It is the same place where, even later, Jesus would stretch out his hands on the cross. The geography is not incidental. It is covenantal. It is sacramental. It is the axis mundi, the center of the world, where heaven and earth meet. The geography of Moriah at this specific moment is crucial. Mount Moriah is limestone, exposed, wind-swept. The ascent with dense oak or terebinth withstrains an aged body. The fire must be kept alive in a brazier. Water skins are nearly empty. The Judean climate oscillates between heat and cold, heightening physiological arousal. The knife, likely flint or early bronze, rests in a leather sheath treated with animal fats. When Abraham draws it, the sound of blade against leather breaks the silence. This is a sensory memory etched into the body. The act of slaughtering an animal, and by extension, the act Abraham is about to perform, follows a specific procedure. The throat is cut swiftly and cleanly, severing the jugular vein and the carotid artery. The blood pours out quickly, and the animal loses consciousness within seconds. This method is designed to minimize suffering and to honor the life being taken. In the sacrificial system that will later be codified in Leviticus, the blood is caught in a basin and then poured or sprinkled on the altar. The blood represents the life, and the life is offered to God as atonement. Abraham, as the patriarch, as the priest of his household, would have been familiar with this procedure. He would have slaughtered animals for food, for offerings, for covenant meals. He knows how to hold the knife. He knows where to cut. He knows how to act swiftly and decisively. This is not a man fumbling in the dark. This is a man who has done this before, who knows the ritual, who understands the gravity. Anthropologically, Abraham knows this gesture. He has offered sacrifices before. His muscles recognize the motion. What they do not recognize is the target. The same hand that taught Isaac to walk now performs the ritual movement reserved for animals. This somatic dissonance amplifies the horror. Faith here is not abstract belief. It is embodied obedience that contradicts instinct, attachment, and memory. The physical posture of Abraham in this moment is also significant. He has stretched out his hand. This is not a passive gesture. This is an active, intentional reaching. The arm is extended. The muscles are tense. The hand is open, then closes around the handle of the knife. In ancient iconography, the outstretched hand is a gesture of blessing, of power, of authority. When Moses stretches out his hand, the Red Sea parts. When Aaron stretches out his hand, the plagues come upon Egypt. When the priest stretches out his hand, the blessing of God descends upon the people. So Abraham's outstretched hand is a priestly hand. It is a hand that mediates between heaven and earth. It is a hand that blesses, that offers, that consecrates. We have now explored the physical world of Genesis 22:10 in rich detail. We have examined the knife, the blade, the handle, the weight, the sharpness. We have climbed the mountain and felt the wind and the heat. We have entered the legal world of the ancient Near East and understood the social and economic significance of the sun. We have traced the geography of Moriah and seen how it connects to the temple and to Calvary. And we have begun to feel, in our bodies, the gravity of what Abraham is doing. In our next video, we will enter the theological and mystical cathedral. We will hear from the Church Fathers, the mystics, the Reformers. We will explore the tears of the angels and the Midrashic traditions. We will see how this moment has been interpreted, contemplated, and prayed over for thousands of years. And we will continue to let this verse reshape our souls. If this teaching is deepening your understanding of Scripture, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Like this video to help others discover this depth of exploration. Share it with someone who is hungry for the Word, who wants to encounter God in the details. And if you have questions, if you need prayer, if you want to connect, you can reach out to us at christforlife143@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We would love to walk with you on this journey. Stay tuned for the next video. Join us next time as we continue verse by verse.